Welcome to the Kung Fu Discussion Group, Expanded Crew Edition. I'm your Uncle Sickness. With me this time, Yoga Midnight, the man called Mako, the Magister. Gentlemen, how are you guys doing?
Good.
Excellent. It's enthusiastic quarantine, high-level energy. Various other things, nootropics, black coffee, cold showers.
Yeah.
We need all of them to handle today's subject matter. We're going to be talking about a very particular piece of literature written by a very particular individual who we might not be able to name, but we're going to name him anyway. Uncle Ted, the Unabomber. We're going to talk about his manifesto and how uncomfortably spot on it really is.
We all need aviators. We should be wearing our hoods and our aviators.
No, right? I only have feminine style pink and purple sunglasses. I don't have my own. I just see all these dudes in trucks wearing sunglasses at night because I'm in Central Ohio, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. You know, I want to get a baseball cap, and I want to fucking curve it so hard that it's practically like a, telescope. They called it the church curve when I was growing up. I want to have that shit like, oh my God, like form fitted to my head, and I want aliens to think that it's part of my biology.
I started to get on Instagram. They started to send me ads for fashionable face masks because of the quarantine. Like this one with like the Church of Satan symbols on it. So that was funny.
Yep, that sounds about right. Oh man, we might have to start doing like just a weekly kind of ridiculous things that happened variety show because
that would work.
There was that IBM ad, the spirit cooking Satanist art woman. Was in this
recent
IBM talking about how the future is some kind of fucking demonic shit. That came out, got pulled almost immediately.
To explain, I didn't even hear of that. Got notes. I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. This is another one of those things that we're probably gonna say. It's like, yeah, we'll put a link down in the description, and then second thought we'll be like, we absolutely cannot direct people to that.
It's an IBM commercial.
Yeah. Maria Abramovic or something like that.
Yep.
Spirit cooking. This woman.
Oh God.
Yeah.
No.
It's basically her talking about what she believes art is and the purpose of art, and
its purpose is to be pedophilia, right?
It's nothing.
We already have one dank topic.
Yeah. So we don't need to get into that. But Matt, you will.
I'm gonna look it up.
You'll find that interesting for a number of reasons.
I looked that shit up for like a month. I was Googling, going through all that stuff, going through her name, going through freaking Hillary Clinton's like campaign manager and all this stuff. And I was just finding weirder and weirder and weirder stuff. And eventually I had to stop it. Like, I can't touch this anymore. It's not.
YouTube doesn't let you investigate Spygate, at least not casually. But it's weird because I got an ad on YouTube where a guy was like, "This is what's going on in Spygate, criminal investigations," and I'm like, "Oh, cool, like Spygate, what's going on?" And it was just like a bunch of like random other shit.
Yeah. YouTube's position as what is it, like the second or third largest search engine?
Yeah.
It's Google, Amazon, and YouTube are the top three. I'm not sure of the positioning.
And two are the same. Google
and essentially, right? That's not at all something to be uncomfortable about.
Mm-hmm.
Fucking dorks with, carbon fiber jaw implants, and it's ridiculous. Anyway, we're not here to make fun of Jeff Bezos. We're here to talk about the Unabomber's manifesto. I've said it a second time. One more time, and the magic will be broken. So, for people who aren't aware, I guess the short version, there was a gentleman who had attained a very high level of mathematics education through the 70s and 80s. By the 90s, he had come to the conclusion that society was on an incredibly detrimental path that would lead to the ruination of the human race. And so he tried to spread the word. Nobody would listen, and he realized that violence was the only way to draw attention to the problem. And he started a campaign of bombing that went on through the 90s, early 90s. I think Bill Clinton's first term.
It lasted for 10 years. It was a long time, right?
It went on for a while. He was yeah, he was well known and active for a number of years. I became aware of him when I got into high school. You know, what with certain other incidents having also happened in the early 90s, like Oklahoma City and the earlier attacks on the Twin Towers, the World Trade Center in New York. Just things like that, like anthrax scares, sarin scares, various things, as I get to say, since I'm old and grizzled, I've told a number of naive millennials that I'm related to or that I've worked with, like, yeah, all this shit that's happening, this is literally the third or fourth time I've seen it, and I'm not even 10 years older than you, so trust me, there are people who they've got decades and decades worth of memories of this sort of stuff happening around the world. And besides the, lizard man conspiracies, which we probably will do another episode on at some other time, just because of how much fun that kind of stuff can be. The media portrayed Kaczynski, the Unabomber. They portrayed him as like a nut and an extremist. But when you actually look into the guy, he's really not. He's not very extreme. He's not very emotional. Everything's very calculated and precise. One thing that I can say, as a low-tier writer and somebody who actually went to college to be an English teacher, this guy's style is pretty engaging. It's pretty tight, very measured. There's nothing wild or outrageous or kind of, exaggerated about it. Everything he says is very deliberate. I find it a very interesting read. It works very well. So the subject matter, of course, is the shortcomings and the negative side effects of a post-industrial society, basically what we're living in now. And how there are all these unnatural conditions from unnatural frustrations on individual action to unnatural living conditions with population densities vastly exceeding what our species evolved to live under, to all these other things with natural drives being subverted and people feeling sort of nihilistic attachment to this weird suffering. It's a lot more. It resonates with what's going on today, especially if you spend as much time on social media as some of us do. This is the sort of thing that could probably be a game changer for some younger people that might not realize how many people feel the way they do right now. Not just in the quarantine world, but also before Corona came and took away all of our rights. I think a lot of people still felt sort of this pressure that they couldn't really explain, this sort of need to do something that they can't even articulate to themselves. His whole breakdown of the power process, this the way in which people sort of gain a psychological sense of power and satisfaction in their life, like control over their world, fulfillment of their goals and desires, their inborn needs and all that. It's all very interesting. I, of course, was immediately attracted to the whole first part about the psychology of leftism, just because as somebody who's really strongly individualist, I find collectivist mentalities and identifying with groups to be incredibly strange. Like I get being part of the team when you're on a sports team, or like in my own work, I have I lead a group of security people. Like I get playing as part of the team in a team sport, but just sort of in general, I mean, I can only wear this sweatshirt with the Sickness Kung Fu logo because I am Sickness. Like I can barely just bring myself to wear my own fucking designation. I don't get this idea of, the the group's success is my success, the group's glory is my. That makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That contrast, it's weird because being on a sort of martial arts path, it's like I don't think you could do that unless you're interested in increasing your individual power. But then it seems like it seems like most of the people that plug in as ideologues stems from a sense of like individual impotence and then sort of resentment for that. But then this like, it's weird, like willing to kind of sort of like detention in a riot, like right before shit kicks off.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that's the best they can hope for, is they just want to be like one of the kind of pairs of hands tearing apart somebody who like may or may not have been guilty of something.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, like at least in terms of my motivations, and I think most of us in terms of martial art, it's about, you know, being able to protect oneself, being able to articulate oneself like martially, and like self-improvement, becoming, you know, a better person and stronger. And whereas those other things, I don't know if this is like a rant or something, just the contrast between the two mentalities, which is irreconcilable, is interesting.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with you on that. There is a huge. I mean, this it's kind of easy to arrive at the conclusion that people are projecting and identifying and stuff like that. But when you really stop to think about, there are people who are so thoroughly convinced that they could never personally improve or amount to anything, so they are obligated to kind of throw in with a group or a larger collective. There's no way around it. I'm never going to do it. I've got to join the party. I've got to join the, you know, the church, whatever they happen to choose.
Well, and I've heard people like, so my dad's smart, but he's also glib, and so he'll like say the same stupid shit. Like, this is you'll be like, oh, politically, it's like tribalization. It's like, no, it's not a fucking tribe, because if it was a tribe, you would know everyone in the tribe and would have like tight bonds from having, you know, built trust. But another part of the leftist thing, it must stem from this devaluation of the family unit in general, the family or the clan, you know, which is, I think, like biological. That's where your priorities are. Like, who's going to help you out when you're in trouble? Who are you going to help out when they're in trouble? Not some random person that has to be of your like sex or identification or whatever, you know? So again, that's a thing that's sort of like, I can't understand that, how people think that any member of some et cetera group is on their team.
Yeah. Definitely not. I mean, I can only think of like 3 of my Xingyi classmates that I could actually count as being like, you know, if we were all at a bar and a fight broke out, you know, I could go back to back with these people. Most of my classmates, it's like, if we were at a bar and a fight broke out, they'd be the one to break a chair over the back of my head.
I think what can we call it, right? So in chemistry, you sort of have this idea when you look at the whole of math of reality, that a lot of things are very weakly held together, of weak bonds, and then not many things have very, very strong bonds. I think in the context of a post-industrial society, self-identified tribes have actually taken the place of clans and tribes. In our context, and we as martial artists, sometimes we don't necessarily see that because our work is very individual, and we start seeing ourselves more and more with respect to what we are doing to ourselves.
Yeah.
Become a bit self-contained. But most people don't even move much, like physically. So they are not even that self-aware. They are very concerned still with relationships and with the family and the clan not really serving the purpose it does. Sometimes even their spouses not serving the purpose that they do. You actually see situations now where in marriages people have sort of like substitute spouses. So there's this thing in religious organizations where a lot more women go to church than men. And actually church now becomes like a substitute husband. That's where you hear the term Jesus is my boyfriend. And so you see more disengagement or alienation from the family, from the spouse, from blood, and more engagement with what we can call ideology or association. So people get very, very attached to this idea of their religious organization or their political affiliation, and it becomes sort of a self-identifying tribe. Now, is it real? We don't know yet because it hasn't really been tested, right?
Yeah, this is probably the first real test on any sort of scale for a lot of these self-identified tribes. I'm personally seeing a surprisingly large number of very devout, good Christian people out here in Columbus, just throwing people under the bus, chomping at the bit. Like they're not very vocal yet, but there are people out here that want a little more government control exerted so that they can start ratting out their neighbors for things like letting their kids go play in the backyard.
Weird.
One of my coworkers, the engineer for the building, there's a couple of people on his street that are like dying to try and get people's kids arrested for going out and like a 10-year-old and 12-year-old boy going out to play fucking catch. These people want to get them in trouble for that.
Yeah.
So
this is the other thing I this like post enlightenment, like a lot of the people that plug into the is like progressive left now, they are atheistic or nihilistic, but then the sort of, it's almost like the religious zealotry has like transferred into this like secular ideology. Like with like the sort of like witch hunts, right? Like the sort of like cancel culture, just like looking to like throw somebody under the bus.
Purity tests.
So it's very interesting. I think that I'm sorry, say what you're saying.
Oh, just like ideological purity tests. Those are a thing again. People getting 2 minutes of hate or banishing the four olds and all these horror stories from the 20th century of just psychotic behavior on a large scale just to avoid being the one singled out, just to sort of it's like an extremely negative type of group affirmation in a way.
There's also like levels of control that exists in the person, because for example, I was working with people that were leftists, clear leftists, but we could still hang out and get like drinks after work or whatever, and then there's the people, like I was bartending with this person who was trans, and like encoded in everything they said was the sort of we're not this, you don't get, like, I don't understand how you view reality, it's like crazy, like the sort of like the kind of like moving things around in order to like have things make sense to them instead of just like seeing things as they were.
Everything's a coded message, everything's a symbol, everything's an implication, everything's a veiled insult.
And there's a lot of passive types that sort of allow their bossy ideologue friends to sort of like push their buttons, like, and keep them on that NPC like corral. I don't know how to say it, like within their mom.
Orange man, bad.
Cheap. Much.
Right? Oh my God, Trump bucks with an X. Yeah, we're gonna have to do an episode on that Adam Shu Xingyi series that I bought with my Trump bucks. I am excited about this. But it's coming all the way from the Communist Republic of California, so who knows when it'll arrive. It's probably going to spend like 6 weeks on donkey back, lost in a desert somewhere. They don't really have any infrastructure in California.
So a lot of what we just spoken about actually is very similar to what Kaczynski was saying in the first 2-3 paragraphs, right? About things of inferiority, over socialization.
Yeah, that's
So much of it is, he believes that it is a requirement for leftist ideology, self-hatred, defeatism, lawlessness, any sort of being constantly self-derogatory, like you said, right? Everything's out of a code. So yeah, it is what you just mentioned is pretty much in line with his introduction to his,
the over socialization part is actually.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I had mentioned that what struck me was the psychology of leftism there, the opening sections. But the over socialization part is actually the most interesting thing about it, that these people are they're so hyper vigilant about following the rules and norms of society that they're actually they're not guidelines, they're actual physical limitations placed on them. It's very striking when you stop to think about it. Certain things that didn't make sense all of a sudden in retrospect, like there you go, you can see it. I'm trying really hard not to make muffin top jokes because I'm thinking about all these people where their chests very tight, the necks are very, they don't really have a lot of rise in the upper arms, they don't have a lot of mobility in the hips, no flexibility in the legs, but then they've just got these just like it explodes out of the top, out from underneath their Cal Arts style degeneracy Cartoon Network t-shirt, Steven Universe, ridiculousness, too tight jeans, just I'm seeing images, people that I know, people that we all, well, Tommy, you're lucky enough you don't know them, but Alex definitely knows one person I'm thinking of. Matt probably does too, although he's probably very, very wisely been like, I banish her from my memory.
For me, if I could go into his views, I sympathize. I can't be dishonest. I do sympathize and I do understand Kaczynski's views and the nihilism that is afflicting a lot of people, and also is very strong pointer to leftism and how that will co-opt any sort of revolutionary movement, so to speak.
Yeah,
I think I'll put my stake in the ground pretty quickly. I think he's a very intelligent man. He saw clearly, again, what is happening in China already, sort of this technocratic totalitarianism that is inevitable in most advanced societies. He has, however, left out this idea that man can be anything more than a pragmatic creature that will take the path of least resistance. Doesn't seem to take into any consideration that there are ethical, legal frameworks that we can develop, that we can live by, right? It's not just about how should we live or what should we do, like the what we should do, but the how and the why. He totally disregards it and believes that we are just not going to figure it out, so to speak.
Yeah.
And are you saying so part of the conclusion is there actually isn't a solution? It's just going down the tubes no matter what?
Yeah. And if you look at it from the perspective of societies do fail at regularly occurring intervals, it's something that, I have to admit, I saw a lot of this book in his manifesto. I saw a lot of it. At least the opening premise of the book, right? That we're going to get into this sort of AI-driven, highly techy society just imposing its will because the individual is not as important as the collective, which society has to run that way. And his conclusion, right? Kaczynski's conclusion is there's nothing we can do about it. And his advocation is there should be worldwide systemic collapse. The trick about what he's suggesting is it's probably not going to happen the way he suggests without us as a world, as a global system, becoming so interconnected that, and he actually says this, by the way, in the manifesto, that we have a sort of domino effect where the fall of one country leads to the fall of the others. Because what will simply happen is other countries will just fill in the gap. They'll just replace the tech.
Yeah.
Right? They'll just buy up the assets and they'll keep it moving. There'll be a Marshall Plan or something.
It would have to be sort of a modern day equivalent of the Bronze Age collapse, where
Exactly.
Its entire population moves to the next area and causes their collapse.
Exactly. Right. And in a highly, if we get to that highly centralized state, then of course, as a globe, we deserve whatever is coming to us, because that is.
Yeah, asking if when you're deliberately building something that fragile, that little resilience, you're definitely, you get what you deserve.
Yeah, we get what we deserve. But as is in a system where there's so much polarity, right, which is the way it should be, right? But there's so much polarity. There's this Zen koan that says two stones striking together cause sparks. The idea of constant conflict being what brings about balance. Now, going back to what's going on during Corona time, we have people that love order so much they won't start snitching out their neighbors. They don't realize that disorder is actually part of what makes society strong. They are so consumed with fear, they want everybody to comply. But if we're ever in a situation where everybody actually complies and there are not people like us discussing the Unabomber Manifesto freely, we are fucked.
Yeah. Yeah, just a few. I mean, people can see pretty clearly what just a few decades of self-congratulatory, patting yourself on the back, sort of where the greatest shit has done for the U.S.
Yeah.
But just going back real quick to the Bronze Age collapse, one group moves to another group and just messes up all their stuff. Isn't that happening in Europe right now?
That's one way you could look at it, and their attempt to kind of centralize in an unnatural, overly rigid way.
Yep.
Great. There are a couple of countries there where the vast majority of the citizens in those countries clearly prefer that level of control, that level of direction. But the vast majority of humans are not capable of doing that. So it was never going to work on the scale that they wanted it to work. And that policy of we're going to say these things for short-term political expediency, opening themselves up to the inevitable conflicts of bringing in completely incompatible cultural contexts and et cetera, et cetera.
I would say definitely any highly centralized state like the EU will have larger potential for collapse than individual city-states, right? Decentralization actually is more resilient than centralization, to your point. There's the more they try and force this sort of consolidation, they get less resilient. The borders not existing, free movement between, it sounds so utopian, but we have to keep in mind that Plato wrote Utopia, right? It wasn't real.
Right. Yeah, that's that old
imaginary place that doesn't exist.
Yeah. That Thomas Sowell quote about how socialism will always persist because it sounds so great to people who just bullshit for a living. Just this idea of, no one suffers, but it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't work in reality. You can't actually have that level of socialization or control, rather. The level of socialization, bringing it back to Kaczynski, that you need for even just you look at the U.S. again, how many people that we know are complete shit show, their life is a mess because of a legit problem, and how many of them are, when I think of most of the people I know basically who are messed up, their problem is definitely what Kaczynski calls over-socialization. They're definitely constrained by these expectations, these unrealistic sort of pseudo-moral calculations for every act, every thought, every possibility. I have to do this because I'm a good person. And yeah, but you don't, or I'm thinking of one cousin, well, I have to be a nurse and take care of people because, I'm a good, you don't like people though. You don't want to take care of people. You want people to die. In that particular case, you want people to die. You don't want people to survive. So this is not for you. Don't do this.
So what was the focus, the inferiority thing too?
Oh,
Or just
yeah, there are people who don't, they'll never be able to bring themselves to believe in their own potential power. They don't think it's possible that they could be successful, that they could be powerful, that they could be, admired or loved or all sorts of that.
Yeah, this is a very big pet peeve of mine. It's something that I'm just sort of growing out of personally. I believe in hyper agency, right? This idea that even if circumstances are so grim, you always have a choice. But when you get into a philosophy where they don't subscribe to any agency and they're saying everything that happens to me is as a factor of somebody else doing something, that is the inferiority that Kaczynski was talking about, right? The total lack of agency. And that's why they get sort of hyper socialized. The rules will save us together.
Yeah, together, right? If we just do what we're
all of us.
If everybody did their part.
But it sticks together form.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. One might
together.
Can't say it.
Coming awfully close. But it's a pretty apt image to kind of illustrate. They really do seem to have that. That really does seem to be their ideal. That if we all just hunker down together and we all just obey, we all get that haircut. We all ask to talk to the manager at the same time. We all talk to our kid with a weird name. Sounds like 3 different names mashed together. I can't even think of any because I don't want to say anything because I know now that I know people out here. I'm just like, what I would say in Massachusetts as a name that you never hear a kid name that. Oh, there's tons of them out here.
So one thing that I find interesting. So I talk about Burroughs a lot, and one of his favorite things to talk about was the word acting as a virus, like words having a viral quality. Which is also reflected in memes. Although I don't like, Richard Dawkins' mimetic theory. It's a little bit clumsy, I think. But there is something to this word virus, idea of virus thing. But part of what's been interesting about the political field, as I've seen it over the last 6 years, is that like the left has sort of fractured itself because the people that are really like kind of really on board with the agenda. I heard Brett Weinstein say that there's actually 2 kinds of leftists. There's the kind that legitimately seeks an equitable situation, wants everybody to get like a fair share. And then there's the leftist that's driven by resentment and a sense of like vengeance of like, well, we need to punish people who have had more for a longer period of time. And the greater body of the population doesn't seem to be on board with that agenda or like like the stuff that the Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer brought to Congress when everybody was on board with the stimulus deal, and they were like, no, we need to do some of these crazy things first before we can pass it. So it's interesting, this sort of like overplaying of the hand, and it's kind of beautiful too, because even like like during the Hillary election, everybody thought Hillary was going to win. She was supposed to win, even Donald Trump. Like that was what the stage was set for, but she didn't win. And it's really beautiful in terms of like, oh, I guess like we can keep playing the game or something, that like it's not like there is no assured victory for the powers that be.
Yeah.
And also I wanted to say there's the potential that there's like different factions amongst the elites. And that could be maybe more of a lizard person discussion, but how like there's like, I think the technocrats is like maybe like a greater body, but I think that there's others too that are opposed to that, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's how many people with vaguely aligned dystopian visions of the future?
Yeah. Loose.
Yeah, the real difference. One group wants to reduce all the regular people to alpha primitives, and the other group wants to reduce all the regular people to sub-omegaloids. But is there really a difference of there being an underslave class and some domineering, clean suit, only their face is revealed, John Byrne, 1989 reboot of Superman comics, no more crystal utopia of Krypton. Now they're all fucking weirdos that like, I'd rather jizz into a cup to create a sun than fucking.
Yeah. And this leads, to sort of where the individual stays in the story.
Yeah.
Like you said, what's the difference? Kaczynski wants this dystopian end because he believes, this is the way we can, because he doesn't want to live in that kind of future. And he doesn't want his kids to live in that kind of future.
Yeah.
Well, you have this other group, right, that sort of wants this utopia, but they believe they have to go through a sort of dystopia to get to it, right? They are falling into the trap, like he says, of believing they can control the society that will come after. At the end of the day, what in the two of them? One of them just has a vision past the dystopia, right? The Bolsheviks wanted the fall of White Russia. The Chinese wanted the fall of the nationalist government, but they had a vision for what they wanted to build, right?
Yeah.
Now we have the accelerationists and people saying, okay, now it's time for sort of Bronze Age collapse. At the end of the day, you're just getting into this Thanos-like situation where you're like, oh yeah, we gotta frag everybody.
What are you gonna do after we kill him? What do we do?
What are we gonna do? Right? We as individuals, we need to stop and think, okay, where do I fit into all this? Am I really going to, at the end of the day, sort of become this sorry to say, genocidal guy in the name of I can't live in this society?
Yeah, and these are some of the advantages that living a more martially oriented lifestyle will give you. That when you're a dedicated martial artist, or you've been in law enforcement or in the military, certain types of organizations, you have to have that conversation with yourself about how much force you're willing to bring to bear in a given situation, how far you're willing to go.
Yep.
If you have to do something incredibly violent to achieve a goal, are you willing and able to do that? Or for just your own survival, are you willing and able to do that?
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people in the accelerationist, boogaloo, enjoy the decline type camp where they don't seem to understand that, like, this is, if everything collapses, that means it's 24/7. We go back to that world where it's every man for himself. At all times. There is no safety. There is no relaxation. Everything's a trap. Everyone's an enemy. Most people aren't built to deal with the stress of even low-grade paranoia.
Yeah.
But to live in a world where literally everything around you is out to destroy you, that would be terrible. I don't see how that is a productive, even as a joke, blowing off steam. Yeah, once in a while it's fine.
You're
going to live your life. You're going to base your identity around this idea that I want society to collapse so that what? So that some madman can turn you into a ceremonial hat. Matt and Alex remember, Tommy, at the museum, I used to have a lot of routines that I would run on people of various levels of comedy. One of them involved the speech about, I will turn your skull into one of the parts of my throat and make ceremonial hat out of it.
Yes.
I will wear this hat on certain days to signify the triumph over the inferior tribes.
We can talk about greatness, great men not having the opportunity to do certain things, but it has always been the case that once a man seeks to exert his will upon society, people band against him and defend themselves.
Yeah.
Because even the weak do not want to be oppressed consistently.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's we're starting to edge toward the hilarious problem I see with modern Christianity, where the more you read what Jesus said, it seems more like he's talking about hyper-individualistic conflict scenarios where, when they hear about me, then everybody in the house will be against everybody else, kind of, not peace but a sword type of thing.
Division.
This societal collapse, hyper-individualism, that's great for people that are already living like that. You know, that's great for a guy like Roman, who's already prepared to live in a hyper individual world, or for people like us that maybe are not living like that already, but I don't think any of us are going to have much trouble transitioning into a world where a compound built out of old shipping containers up on the mountains. Like, you know, I'm saying that super glibly. I don't have a
Real
problem.
talk.
But just there are a lot of people out there with very soft, very round physiques. You know, a lot of people that can't do a pull up, can't do a chin up, can't do a push up. Talking about, oh, what we're going to do when the government is destroyed. Oh, when we overthrow America, what are you going to do? You're going to be grist for the grist mill.
I want to read. So there's this line in the I Ching that in the past, I had read this and I was like, oh shit, this is like the political spectrum as I see it, or like the basic scenario. It's in hexagram 2, the receptive line 6. Dragons fight in the meadow. Their blood is black and yellow. In the top place, the dark element should yield to the light. If it attempts to maintain the position to which it is not entitled and to rule instead of serving, it draws down upon itself the anger of the strong. A struggle ensues in which it is overthrown, with injury, however, to both sides. The dragon, symbol of heaven, comes to fight the false dragon that symbolizes the inflation of the earth principle. When black and yellow blood flow, it's an unnatural contest. Both primal powers suffer injury. And I had read this around the time that Game of Thrones ended. I got into Game of Thrones like pretty late, like in like season 7 or something. I binge watched it. Mm-hmm. It was entertaining, but I definitely saw this sort of heavy-handed kind of like political message going in. And I felt like it was like, oh shit, that's like the false dragon. Like basically, like everybody that was like, yeah, we want Daenerys to win. She's a dragon. It's like, that's the false dragon though. That's not the strongest. That's not the one that should be on the throne or calling the shots.
Yeah. That's an interesting idea. I immediately think of, there's a chapter in Zhuangzi, the old fisherman, where Confucius and his disciples are kind of out in the wilderness, and they happen upon just like an old man in a boat. And he sort of schools them on the point, you know, why are you doing what you do? It's kind of a waste of time, don't you think? And he says a few things, and Confucius is very impressed. And he's like, well, let me learn from you, the way he tends to do, you know, the whole thing of, if I meet 4 people on the road, I should be able to learn something from at least one of them, kind of thing. Cool. But the guy just tells him straight up, like, I could try and teach you, but you're such a screwhead who's so deformed with the education you've already received that it would be a complete waste of my time to try and explain this to you, because you'll never be able to do this. You will never do this. So what's the point? And he just sort of, please tell me. And he lays it out for him. And he's like, do you see how you're already constrained? This is exactly the sort of thing that Kaczynski means by over-socialization. Confucius was so used to thinking of himself as a person that pursues education and improvement that he's not really capable of anything, because he never really spends, you know, it's always he gets this shiny bauble and then he's on to the next one. Oh, there's this new principle that I don't, you know, you've got a good way of putting this. Oh, let me study from you. Great. You know, this is the Twitter equivalent would be everybody that puts out a course or drops an ebook for $89.97. You have, but you haven't put even one of these elements or one of these ideas into practice yet.
Yeah.
And yes, that is exactly how I see Confucianism. You know, they presume you are to obey the Lord as a regular person, but they presume to tell the Lord how he should exercise his position of rulership or whatever. It's no good to me. And again, right back, another nice, different, similar example of over-socialization. These people are so wrapped up in this idea of the rules will save us. No, they won't. They will just eliminate certain possibilities that should be obvious.
It's, to talk about Confucius, and I found Zhuangzi is very, he really beats up Confucianism with a big stick.
Yeah.
Indirectly, but it's clear that that's not his favorite philosophy.
Yeah. There's some of the best shit talk is directed directly at the master.
Yeah.
Or the master says something that's just like, oh man.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you said something very good. You know, we as hyper individualists and people that are really engaged in hyper agency, even if things go to pot, we will take responsibility one way or the other.
Yeah.
If you look at we as a species, right, we're over 7 billion people. The only way we could reach 7 billion people is because we can not only feed 7 billion people, but we can move enough food around.
Yeah.
Right. So we got all this high yield rice, high yield wheat built that is farmed hundreds of thousands of miles away from us, and then we move it. All this stuff is post-industrialism. All this stuff is abstract concepts, supply chain models, and then acceleration is say, yeah. People go hungry, people die.
Yeah.
People, it's just something that I in reading again, I had a lot of sympathy, because you look at what's going on in China and you're like, whoa, you know, I don't want that. I don't want that level of control. Let's have the hyper agency back, right? But we forget that Kaczynski forgot that he sort of broke out, right? He went from a highly theoretical person to someone that was living in the fields, living in the country,
yeah,
working off the land, and then he decided, okay, I need to send a message. And instead of coming to send a message in a peaceful way, sort of like a prophet, right?
Yeah.
And teaching people maybe there's a better way, he decided to come at it like a bit of like a perverted warrior.
Yeah.
Very destructive, trying to pass his message across. The consequences of what he's saying are so highly destructive. It is like, again, I keep thinking back to people like Thanos, or, you know, for an even older model, let's look at the Frost Giants.
Yeah.
In the Nordic Eddas, in the poetical Eddas, they were ready for Ragnarok. They wanted the end of the world, right? This damn Aesir, this damn gods came out of nowhere and took what's ours. You know, now we're bigger, we're stronger, we got more people. Let's go get them.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I personally would, no matter how flawed the current system is, again, of course, if the current system goes into a stage where super centralization, and this is a real danger. There are these masters of the universe type people, right, that want single bureaucratic control, dictatorial control over people. Fine. In that kind of situation, then the system has to collapse on itself anyway. But as is, decentralized nation states, even as long as they don't violate their own rules of law, I would say this is something that there has to be another set of people that sort of sublimate their individual desires, right? Sort of like we have the Green Berets and the Navy SEALs. These are madmen, right? They would kill, but they have decided that they would kill in the service of something that they believe in.
Yeah.
Right? Not in service of some ideology that will lead to the end of the world. No, they're like, they will be the ones that will stand against that apocalypse.
Yes.
Even we on the outside, we have to decide which part we want to be in, right? Are we going to be the ones pushing the envelope of the apocalypse happening, or are we going to be the ones standing against it?
Yeah.
I
would agree with that. So yeah, I would agree that we're looking at a situation now where the people that are most harmed by the system, and Kaczynski does straight up refer to this kind of overarching societal construct as the system throughout this document. The people that are being hurt by it the most are the people who stand the least chance of surviving its downfall, collapse, alteration, removal, whichever level you want to go. These people who, you know, they're being oppressed by the lack of meaning and purpose in their life. You know, their lives would have been meaningful in the struggle for basic necessities, food, shelter. So if we take this away, they're in a position now where they are incapable of getting those things. they'll die before they gain the competence to gain those things, those necessities. So what do we have to do? Like reverse the Industrial Revolution, spend 120 years weaning people off going to the grocery store to get their meat and get them used to, you know, you can have chicken tonight if you raise fucking chickens and then go murder a chicken and then cook the chicken and eat it right now. Then you can have the chicken. Like,
Oh yeah.
how
Well,
many?
it seems like, I don't know. I mean, I've met a lot of people over the last 5 years that seem to, and across the board, like politically, who have like a secret desire to like go live off the land somewhere with like a small tribe of people. And I think that's interesting. I think a lot of like, because I was having fantasies about civilization collapsing since junior high. And I don't think that, I think it's actually quite common. A lot of people have a sense that something's wrong with the way things are, and that there would be more fulfillment in something more natural, albeit more dangerous, and maybe you're not going to live as long, you know?
Yeah.
It seems to be, I mean, I had the same exact thing going from high school to now, but it seems from the people that I've spoken with in the Boston area, you know, Brad, you know, it seems to me that there's a deep primal need that the Unabomber seems to point out, that we've either, we're outright, there's construction going on in the back. I'm sorry. There's either like we've been trained to try to ignore,
Yeah.
or a lot of people have just been trained out of it. But as you look internally, as you know, following the martial path as we all have, that seems to grow a little bit more in each of us, that we want it, that apex predator kind of, you know, in the back of your head.
Yeah. Well, he talks about this kind of stuff too. That some people are able to find fulfillment under this system because they have sort of alternatives, alternative goals. Some people, in the case of what we were talking about earlier, the overly socialized or the overly pessimistic, you know, victim mentality type person, they may gain a sense of power by identifying with an institution or an organization or a religion or a political figurehead. They get their sense of fulfillment from the organization or the individual's success. There are the other end of people who just sort of, I can find a sense of fulfillment in pursuing this goal that can occupy my time and my mind in novel ways, but you know, it doesn't affect my status in society. It doesn't affect whether I eat tonight or not, you know, whether I sleep in a warm place or not. But in one sense, I do openly admit that my pursuit of martial arts, I'll speak only for myself. That's kind of like one of these alternative goals, one of these substitutes where I'm never going to be, I don't have the patience to sit down and like treat the dummies like their little dummy concerns matter. So I'm never going to have social status or political power. So instead I pursue martial arts because, you know, objectively, if I throw a punch wrong, you guys are going to be like, yeah, that looks stupid. That's not going to work. Or, you know, if I do the chop wrong, you're going to be like, yeah, that's not going to, you know, that doesn't work. You don't do it like that. You know, I like that. I like the instant feedback. I like I have a theory, you have a theory. Let's see who's right. You know, I enjoy that aspect of the martial way very much. It's one of the hardest parts to sell, I find, to these types of people, what we call the normies on the internet, trying to convince them like, no, having your friend punch you directly in the mouth, like that's actually fucking great. It'll bring you closer, I promise. Trust me, you'll love this guy, Steve.
You love him like a brother.
Yeah, but they don't. For these people that are used to, you know, you only engage in conflict when you're trying to kill somebody and steal all their shit. You know.
Did any of y'all read The Way of Men?
I've been meaning to. I haven't gotten to that one.
I haven't read it.
Good. There's a lot of like similar idea. I mean, because essentially Jack Donovan is talking about the sense of alienation that's so like all permeating for modern men, and how society seems to be, you know, is telling us that being a man is wrong, and sort of trying to like, so going from a disempowered state to trying to like let people push themselves to a lower level of personal power.
Yeah.
Back on the Game of Thrones tip, I've noticed in fiction, so basically it's like communist types, it's like they don't believe in like a spiritual reality, so they think that their sort of ham-handed ideas are archetypes and need to be like woven into new myths.
Yeah.
And so this sort of like new myth I've seen, like in Star Wars and Game of Thrones, is this kind of self-dispossessed king, like cuckold king, like basically somebody who's like in a position to, somebody who's like the hero who's like, no, I don't want to let somebody else do it,
There's
which
no
is
such
like
thing as people being better than other people, but I'm definitely better than you and inherently in charge. But I'm so much better that I won't actually tell you what. I can't even fucking finish that joke. I agree with you, Matt. I see that too. Increasingly, I loved comic books growing up, so I've been keeping an eye as an adult.
oh god, they're getting weird, right?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like those poor bastards can't go out of business fast enough. They
Made a character called Snowflake and
yeah,
Safe
it just keeps getting
X-Men.
worse and worse and worse. Like
Really, Snowflake.
self-insert characters, like I wrote when I went to Spain after college, I wrote a graphic novel where every single character was somebody that I knew in real life. Everything with the exception of the main villain and like a dinosaur humanoid old man that like gave somebody advice. It was all self-insert characters. Like everybody that I knew was in this. People that pissed me off died in awful ways, like getting sucked out into space while taking a shit. Just, ridiculous college stuff. But now I have this image of somebody, oh my God, he died on the toilet. Where did he get that dog and why is it on his lap so awkwardly? Really weird. Like, and that's the last comment about, I was really mad at a very particular person. That's how I wrote his character out of the story.
Oh, man.
I wasted for real, like 15 pages getting them into space just could be discovered molesting small lap dogs. Needless to say, it was not a publishable work. It was not going to really sail for the most part. Matt once criticized some of my jokes as being overly inside, like joke oriented. Dude, if you had read this work, you would have been like, I know all of those words and don't understand because it was just entirely inside jokes. In retrospect, but it did have people launching asteroids at planets, which was very cool. And dinosaur people.
Yeah.
Also cool.
Yeah. So it's lovely you mentioned archetypes, right? About this sort of like cuckolded king or weird king models that they don't really have any power, but they're sort of giving power.
Yeah.
Again, sympathetic, but I'm going to go in on Ted here, and he's a living man, so he can defend himself.
Well, actually, all that stuff does tie back into Confucianism again, because before the Confucians gained the position of like the state orthodoxy, they had this idea of the uncrowned king. You may have the money and the power and the army and the obedience and all that, but I have the regal nobility of better than you-ness.
Imagine that.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's actually there's a whole couple of really interesting fragmented books from the like mid to late Warring States period, the Pheasant Cap Master.
That's perfect.
And they talk about the uncrowned king, and it's a very big thing that But once the Han Dynasty kind of put the Confucians in place as kind of the state orthodox sort of spiritual outlook, man. It's again Dune. There's a new Dune movie coming out. What was that line from Dune? When you're in charge, I beg for mercy and tolerance because that's according to your principle. But when I'm in charge, you don't get shit because that's according to my principle.
Wow.
And we are rapidly moving towards that in certain ways. But these ideas are all over the place. This impotent power. Again, now it's me thinking of sanction. One more time, because there are so many individuals in powerful positions in sanction that when you really stop and think about it, you may have power in name and in society, but out in the actual world, in terms of like goals accomplished or actions accomplished, some of the people in positions of power are not actually powerful. They are not actually capable. Matt, Alex, Have either of you read Sanction yet?
What is
No,
that?
not yet.
Oh my God, Roman McClay, who was on one of the episodes of Crossing Hands. He's in the Kung Fu discussion group, Twitter chat. It's Sanction is.
I'm not getting paid for this.
Yeah, you guys know I do read a lot, but I'm not big on fiction. Sanction is fiction, and I love it. There's 2 books right now. He's working on the 3rd. Highly recommend you grab this. It's like I said, it's the reason that I started thinking about Ted Kaczynski and his manifesto, and all those things in the first place, because there are a lot of resonant themes. You know, this idea of like technology will limit you in some ways, but it opens up other possibilities. Some people are capable of accepting the limitations and working, you know, within those new boundaries in order to really profit from the possibilities offered. And some people, you know, they only see a limitation. They'll never be able to see around. You know, the over-socialized thing, as Kaczynski calls them, these people that are, they're so concerned with obedience to the rules that they're not really capable of doing anything. They fail only because they're incapable of actually acting in the first place. There's a good amount of that in Sanction. I just, you know, I think you'll both really enjoy it. You know, gene editing, clones, artificial intelligence, having the internet installed into your fucking brain with nanomachines. I mean, you guys need to get in on this. It would have been great if Roman could have been here for this, because I think you guys would have really enjoyed his views on this. So, but yeah, check out Sanction 1 and 2. A little name drop. We always like to help people out here in the discussion group.
Yeah.
And if you actually are, you know, for anybody out there that is uncomfortable reading Kaczynski's writing, like if you're uncomfortable,
Yeah, go fuck yourself.
voice to this person because he's in prison for terrorism or whatever, well, this is a way for you to kind of delve into some of those similar ideas in a much
in a very
more morally clean, shall we say, context.
Yeah. You know, we have you know, going back to this shadow king idea, impotent or uncrowned king, or this concept, right? We've become and it's interesting that you said, was the Han Dynasty that wasn't that was the dynasty before the Mongols, right?
Yeah, they were well before the Mongols. They immediately succeeded the Qin. So they were the first
Qin.
sort of stable, popular imperial dynasty.
Yeah, so they were one of the first unites of China. But you know, it's interesting because you see it in the Xuanzu and in Lao Tse's work, right? The more formalistic we get, the more we sort of have this lack of real people anymore. And because Confucius was supposed to be wise, but the institution of the Confucianists it didn't work, right? It became like super bureaucrats.
Yeah. Why would you give state education control to a group of people who were specialists at interpreting ritual text? You know, this job was to tell you if this line of poetry meant A, B, C, or X, Y, Z. And you want to have this person all of a sudden. And what are we doing in our society now? Like, you look at a lot of places, they're going the China route. You know, wait, I don't like the way you wiped your nose there. We want to have a discussion about your ideological purity. Or we go the Western route. Anything can be anything. Nothing's even real.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Fucking mirrors be real if our eyes aren't real.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
For any of the things that Will Smith's kids put on Twitter. Weirdos. But this kind of idea, I don't know. I mean, it just puts, you know, my own personal leaning is always towards Zhuangzi because I like the idea of, I can handle the idea of a pluralistic mindset. I'm comfortable with the multiple points of view, multiple contexts, multiple, you know, I'm comfortable with meaning changing according to time and place and parties involved. So that's where I lean. But I also do greatly appreciate the Buddhist idea of the middle path, of just kind of taking that middle route between extremes, trying to find a harmonious balance.
Boom, right there. That's it.
I probably spent about 5 years in my 20s studying Chan Buddhism.
Yeah.
The Platform Sutra,
Dharma.
the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra. Those are my big, and of course, Blue Cliff Record for just Zen koans. Like, I love those. Those are some of my favorite books. And it's interesting to I got into that stuff to kind of support my study of Zhuangzi. In an interesting way. When Buddhism comes to China, they find fertile intellectual ground has already been laid by the existence of the Zhuangzi. So it made it easier to kind of import certain Mahayana ideas into a Chinese cultural context. So Zen, like a lot of things about Zen, Chan Buddhism, koans, different principles, different images, these are heavily influenced by Zhuangzi or are straight up Buddhist adaptations of images and ideas and characters from Zhuangzi, from Taoist literature and so
Excellent.
it's great stuff. I highly recommend. Again, if you're only going to read one, I would recommend the Platform Sutra. This was written by a guy who was an illiterate peasant who just happened to kind of like glance and gain instant enlightenment in a very unique flash kind of moment. It's good stuff. Not too long, not too overly complex, but definitely accessible. So
yeah, and talking about that middle path, right?
Yeah,
I think again, going back to me going in on Kaczynski, and not only Kaczynski, but what is the difference between someone that says we must break the rules to save humanity and someone that says we must keep the rules to save humanity? At the end of the day, neither party, neither the Bronze Age collapse folks, sorry, BAP, Kaczynski, anybody that is about there, let's accelerate and get to the end of this, nor the leftists that are dreaming up some weird utopia at the end of the rainbow, after, of course, they kill everybody that doesn't agree with them.
Yeah, right.
Neither party is worthy of emulation, followership, or any sort of admiration.
Yeah, again, it's the big problem. I've mentioned this in a few other episodes. A great book from the late 60s, The Stone Monkey. A Yale sociologist studied as part of his doctoral work, his postgraduate work. He studied with a traditional Chinese scholar for a couple of years in China in the 60s. And from that perspective, he diagnosed the big problem in Western culture as being the law of the excluded middle ground.
Yeah.
A lot of Western thinking is based on this idea of there's only the extremes, this place where black and white can come together. There is no gray, there's only black or white. There is no place where you can find common ground with an enemy. There's only the point where it's kill or be killed. So this, again, that kind of conflict between the people who want to put the collapse off for as long as possible or the people who want to accelerate the collapse, they're both insane.
Insane. Yeah.
Those wildfires in California are a good example of that situation played out in real life.
Remember that? Yeah.
Conserve the forest, and they built up the kindling that led to the massive uncontrolled blazes. There are people who wanted to start blazes early. This way they're canceling each other out, so nothing is getting done one way or another. A conflict between two choices that are so contextually inappropriate that no one can see all of the appropriate choices left in the middle ground that's been ignored and excluded.
Nobody wants to build up we all talk about saving the individual, but what about the individual's inner man? What about his ethical growth, his moral and legal growth? What about his education? Even if it is by indirect means. I'm not talking about programming or the nudging state now, but if we truly have this idea that man is disillusioned and is alienated from his society, then is that not what principles like Taoism, Chan Buddhism, and even the works of Christ? Is that not what they address? Is it not the alienation that they actually focus on bringing us away from, right? Instead, we're so focused on imposing our will to power on the world. We don't want to see anything beyond that. And we get into this, it's an either or scenario. When seasons will come, states fail, societies do collapse, rebuild themselves on a fractal level, and we proceed. We as a species keep moving on. Famines will come, floods, natural disasters. We don't need to intervene in things. We just need to be present.
Yeah. Again, it's very lost on people nowadays that sometimes a light touch is preferable. There's a certain individual that both Matt and Alex know from the museum. I explained one time to this person that too far is exactly as bad as not enough. That started a 3-month argument about how, well, no, because too far isn't far enough, but enough is too much. And it's just like, what are you even saying? You don't even know, you only speak one language, but you don't speak it well enough to even understand the arguments you're trying to make here. So this was the same person that thought that the squeaky wheel gets the oil is about being rewarded for ratting out other people. No, the squeaky wheel gets the oil is another way of saying the nail that sticks up the furthest gets hammered down the hardest. Well, I don't agree with that, Brad.
Wait,
Who is that?
Is this the same
Oh,
person?
you know who it is.
Yeah, just say the
You know
name.
who it is. The smartest, most talented, least goofy-looking chick I ever dated for 5 years. Anyway, we don't need to talk about that.
Brad, this isn't the one that was obsessed with squares, was it?
No. Well, no, this was the one who broke up with me because I told her, I like to watch Married with Children. I don't want to be Al Bundy. And staying with you would turn me into Al Bundy. And I'm not doing that, baby. So that was that. Yeah. So we break up the next day. Person obsessed with squares, a former coworker from the museum days, hit on this girl so aggressively that she literally came back like this at the end of her shift, was like, I'm sorry, I was wrong. We should try to work together to find mutually acceptable solutions to our problems. I was being unfair to you and heavy-handed. And I was like, what happened? She was like, oh, well, Night at the Roxbury? I was like, yeah. She was like, well, Derek was there and Jeremy was there. I was like, oh my God, they Night at the Roxbury you? She was like, I was behind the desk too. It was amazing that they were able to pull it off.
Oh, man.
That had to go on like another 6 months because, before anybody knew, these two dudes just like sensed it in the ether and they were like, and they vibrated down to harass this poor woman for being blonde. That's what you get.
It's a jungle out here.
Right?
Literally.
Yes. Squares.
I can't. So this isn't like, this might be a little fragmented, but I'm trying to say something.
Okay.
But I was thinking like, so because like Ted Kaczynski's work is talking about the effects of tech is like a big part of it, right? Like technology and this like direction that's putting humanity on. Especially like Taoist martial arts, but especially like Taoist practices. I think there's something really, it puts you in tune to this like primordial state of mind, and which is like superior to ideology because there is no ideology, right? It's like the formlessness. Like you get into that sort of like first thought of no thought, and then you go back and then you can kind of tease apart like, all right, no, that was dumb what I was like obsessing over.
It's dealing with your relationship to your environment from an unself-conscious position of your own sort of physiology as being at the center of your world.
Yeah.
So not an egotistic, intellectual, I am
right.
controller. No, not like that sort of domineering way that a lot of people are nowadays, but just sort of, the way a musician will bring an instrument into tune before beginning to perform a piece. You want to kind of tune your physiology with the natural world, and then certain problems automatically disappear. You know, certain causes of stress are in, you know, poor sleep, dysregulated diet, lack of exercise or physical stimulation. So you take care of those problems, you take care of those areas of disharmony, all that disappears. And then you're only left with, you know, I live in a society where they said it's illegal to be what I am, or I live in a society where everybody's talking about this thing that isn't actually, you know, they're talking about unicorn fairies stinging people to death. Or my personal favorite, hysteria, is the one about the wizards stealing penises that popped up in a very particular country in the 90s.
Where is this?
Is a very certain country in West Africa that may or may not historically be closely related to other countries that three of us are in right now. But there was a country where an individual had a sort of psychological episode where he was wizards had stolen his penis directly off of his body. And he was like, look, it's gone. And people were like, no, you definitely have junk. Stop showing that to me. And he was like, the wizards stole it.
It was like a hypnosis.
So
that was a big thing. And like,
convince other people that wizards were stealing their penises too. And then there was this whole thing where, you know, an uncomfortably large number of men were running around in the capital city of this country screaming about wizards having stolen penises, and we need to stop these wizards right now to get our penises back.
They're fucking evil.
Yeah, well, shit like this, I when you bring yourself into a closer attunement with the natural world, where you're sleeping on a normal cycle, you know, you're sleeping when it's dark outside, you're active when it's daylight out, that kind of thing, you're drinking enough water, you know, your body's making vitamin D because you get enough sunlight. Like when you take care of things like that, then you have more, you know, mental space to deal with problems like, are there really wizards stealing penises? Cool. Do we really need to worry about that? Is there really a group of lizard men in a bunker 10 miles underneath London that control the world? Really have this?
Really?
Like that's, you know, really? You can stop. And as ridiculous as that stuff sounds, you would think that an advanced, modern, whatever society, like you think that we would be in a position now where people can finally ask these questions. Will I really find gold if I catch that leprechaun that I'm convinced lives, you know, in the, you know, if I find a bunch of little mushrooms that look like houses, will I be able to use Smurfs to make that alchemical gold? Like, you know, like you should have this sort of, I think a lot of people still have that weird slave mentality that they, you know, they don't think of the product, like intellectual labor doesn't produce anything valuable or desirable. But at the same time, you know, I'm thinking of a person I know that doesn't believe in the fruit of intellectual labor, but he has an office job, you know? So you get an office job, so you're better than me because I work with my body by pointing this face at people and scaring them away from the building I guard, you know? But you know, you sit at a desk doing math for things that don't even fucking, you know, like you're making
abstract.
Yeah, like you're making potential budgets. If we buy this other company, what would our weekly budget look like? And then you fucking do this. And they're like, oh, thanks, but we decided, you know, not to buy that company. So you just spent a month fucking doing this for no.
Yeah.
Whatever. Anyway, that's rambling.
Well, I think on an individual level, so like some like kind of like poetic terminology that I've thought about for the last 10 years is this idea of soul loss, which exists in like shamanic cultures, this idea that people can actually lose pieces of themselves. When I started to work at Trader Joe's, when I moved to New York, this Peruvian hustler kid I worked with, Diego, was like, man, don't become a Hawaiian shirt because they'll try to get you at a low moment. Basically saying like you break up with your girlfriend, your music career is not going where you want, and then they'll be like, hey, maybe you should go full time, and that they like end up kind of like going a little crazy, like losing their humanity.
Yeah.
And I think that the body is it's a natural antidote because as soon as you're like paying attention to it, then it kind of recalibrates your priorities. And I think that ultimately it's a safeguard. It's the best chance that humanity has for staying humanity because anybody in tune with it isn't going to do something that's like contrary to it, you know. And that's what's part of what's weird about the ideologues or like the progressive ideologues is because like so much of their dogma is like self-destructive and self-defeating or disempowering. But I think enough people, I think enough people are, it's like, right, well, I'm not going to put me and my family in a FEMA camp, so I'm going to go over there, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's nothing the beauty of the society that we're living in. Wow. And I'm in shock that we have to contemplate this. If you want to go off and live in the wilderness, it is literally an act of will. There is nothing stopping us
Mhm.
apart
Well,
from
yeah. In most places,
inner man.
why wouldn't you?
Yeah, there's nothing stopping us. You can live in the country, or you can even go. People have a choice, but to break themselves of their socialization, right? And again, Kaczynski mentioned all this, but that is more an inner journey. We don't need the rest of society to go down to the wilderness with us if we want to. We can go off and live
Yeah.
and
See, now,
find
actually,
ways to survive off the land.
So Confucianism kind of emerged as one of the earliest two big intellectual traditions in China. The other being the Mohists. They're usually referred to nowadays because of their universal love principle and their belief that certain things like music and fashion and public displays of mourning are completely inappropriate and superfluous. In a lot of ways, the founder of the movement, Mo D, is sort of like Ted Kaczynski. Like you may be talented, you may be brilliant, you may be capable of cutting ties with society and going out into the wilderness and striking out on your own and all that. You can do that. Regular people can't do that. So for an unusually capable or talented person to tell normies the way to happiness is to do this completely insane shit that literally no one but me is capable of, it's another, again, that law of the excluded middle ground that we were just talking about. You've got people the whole destroy society and start fresh. Great. A fraction of 1% of the human race is capable of doing that. The vast majority of people would either be destroyed or would be setting themselves up to suffer. But this whole preserving everything intact the way that it is now isn't a good alternative either. That'll just put us in, we stay in the position we're in now, where we've got these people sort of slowly withering away, 19, 20 years old, and they're bitter old men, bitter old women already. How can you be jaded before you've ever experienced life? I spent most of my 30s asking that question with a smirk on my face, but I was seriously trying to figure out how there were a bunch of people 10 years younger than me that just didn't seem to understand that, when you're 23 and you have no responsibilities, and it doesn't matter if you blow your job off 3 days in a row to go, follow 311 around on tour and take mushrooms every day for a week. Like, fucking come. Yeah, I did just admit that I once encouraged somebody to quit their job and follow 311 around on tour. Where's Tony Sobiak when we need him?
But as far as the contrast between those that are desperately trying to prevent the fall and those that are trying to accelerate it, is there a middle ground?
Yeah.
Are we able to?
But the problem is that for the people that are, like I had said earlier, these people that are suffering the most under the system are the same people that are too socialized to be able to adapt to a sudden change. One of the things Kaczynski points out that's a big problem with post-industrial society is that in less than a generation, you can have massive social and technological change. We all know somebody right now who was born at a time when the internet was beyond impossible fantasy. Like, we all know at least one person where science fiction, the Star Trek science fiction future of fucking video calls, having a touch screen computer, all this shit that was just, stuff on the TV. And now we live that world. There are a huge, anyway, my point, babblingly enough. There are plenty of people who, even though there is a middle ground that you could strike, Alex, they're never going to be able to do that. They're too socialized or too terrified. They're too self-defeating or too self-aggrandizing to notice that there actually is a relatively easy, convenient way where you can get all the benefits of living in this society, but you don't have to be oppressed by it. It just means you have to give certain things up, do certain other things instead.
So yeah, to Alex's point, right? If we study historically when societal collapse occurs, when states fail and they go into the period of chaos before they sort of reform themselves, it always occurs when they break the rules, their own ethical and legal standards that they've set for themselves.
Yeah.
If we go to the Poetic Edda, one of the things that happened that started precipitating Ragnarok was when Odin banished Loki for the offenses that he had done. Not to say Loki was not to be banished, but Odin and Loki were blood brothers. They had a covenant, which Odin could not do anything to harm Loki. Now, Odin decided to say, okay, this means I can't kill you for committing a capital offense. But actually, even him banishing Loki led to a situation where Loki went on to father 2 or 3 of the creatures that actively participated in Ragnarok, and led to Loki actually becoming an antagonist in the whole process. Because without Loki, the whole situation would not have occurred. But the key was when their blood brotherhood was broken. So when we violate, same thing in Roman society, when they went through the civil war between Caesar and Pompey, they violated rule of law in trying to punish Caesar politically instead of just treating him like any other consul that was coming back in, allowing him to run for governorship. So every society that sort of goes through, if we look at even the French Revolution, what occurred there was a financial failure, and the contract that existed between the nobles, the aristocracy, and the masses was broken. The masses are constantly looking up to the nobles and saying, hey, you are better than us, right? So do your part in taking care of this social contract. And once they failed, then the people turned on them. Same thing in the American Revolution, when the British decided to impose draconian laws, even against their own legal structure, breaking the laws that they had set in place. The danger with Kaczynski's pieces is he assumes that this is a fait accompli. We are going to violate our own laws for the sake of convenience. And he's not talking about we the people. He's talking about the leadership, that the leadership will become, corrupt to the state that they will actually suspend things that we consider sort of ethical, moral, legalistic norms of today, such as unnecessary search and seizure, the Second Amendment, things like that. Of course, if these things are violated, then it opens the door.
Yeah. All that slippery slope talk, all that
it
PSA body scanners and police with those briefcases that let you see if someone has a gun or not.
All societies since the Bronze Age, right, have been built on this idea that chaos and order must coexist together, but chaos must be pushed aside by order.
Yeah.
Once we break our own rules and we decide to for the sake of convenience, right, people snitching on their neighbors, right? So for what? The kid is playing in the backyard. They have broken no law.
Yeah.
If they have broken no law. These laws are not laws that's why most states are not enforcing the states of emergency. They're just looking away because they know if they violate that social contract, if there's an overreach on the parts of the states, that will actually be an accelerationist push.
Yeah.
They are aware.
Yeah.
So the middle ground is for us to keep building our ethical, our legal, and our moral framework. How then do we live? And actually sticking to it and being very, very dogmatic that no, we will not violate this for convenience or for some exigency or for some state of emergency. And if we do, it will be within the structure of how that law and how that ethical framework is created. We are not beasts and we are not lazy, slothful people. We can be better and we have to believe in ourselves. Because if we are not, what Kaczynski is talking about will happen.
Yeah. Yeah. That terrified idiocracy, as fun a movie as that can be, I don't want to live in a future like that. I don't like the idea of automation in that sense. I love the convenience of the internet, but I still buy physical books. There's a bunch of books that I've picked up, you know, PDFs or Kindles or whatever. I've still bought a physical or plan to buy a physical copy of the book. I've got the Kindle version of both sanctions, and I've got the physical copy of both sanctions. So
yeah, there is the conflict is good. We have to constantly push back against the surveillance state and against corporate technocracy. That's part of life. We have to accept it. That fight is the good fight, right? And we have to keep telling people, hey, you don't have to be alienated. You don't have to be nihilistic. And we have to find ways to pass that good news. It is not a coincidence that, you know, Uncle is involved in Taoism and study. And look, men of action must study. We must study. Musashi said that the way of the strategist is the twofold way of the pen and of the sword. If we don't understand how we should live, I mean, Musashi went around killing other swordsmen for years until he slew a particular swordsman and he decided that, wait a minute, what am I doing here? That man was a super talented dude and I just killed him. And he decided to stop doing duels to the death. He stopped believing in might is right.
Yeah.
He stepped away from that. And that was when he wrote the Gorino Show. And that's when he started having students. And he still dwelled, but now they were not to the death.
Yeah.
He achieved enlightenment. And he saw that I don't have to prove my strength by constantly killing those that I believe are my competition. I can coexist alongside them. We have to give people a chance to step out of their own mental brain fog. Fine, if they decide that they want to continue down that path, so be it. If we are strong, we have to protect the institutions and the rules of law that keep the structure in place.
Yeah.
Because again, if those things break down, it's not a if. If those things break down,
it's not freedom.
It will
occur. Rules.
Yeah. It's going to happen because you will realize then that people, once that societal contract is broken and people feel like they are being oppressed on a consistent basis, it's as if they have no choice.
Yeah.
Right. Eventually, you sow the seeds, and this is the hearts and minds thing that military is always talking about in counterinsurgency. Once you have an oppressive government, those insurgencies start springing up and they don't die. They do not die. They can last 40, 50 years. They become very dogmatic and they just never give up. And eventually they burn the whole thing down.
Yeah. 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 There has to be a way. Actually, the middle ground is a great image for this type of discussion. You know, it seems like a lot of people think you have to exclude the middle ground because if we fill it up, then there's chaos. But no, the more you put in the middle ground, the wide, like you never fill up the space. There's always an expansion. There's always more. Infinite volume. There's infinite room for new ideas, new experiments, new attempts at organizing a society. It's not going to create chaos. It's going to create more opportunity. But conversely, that whole idea of if we destroy order and society and the rule of law, then there'll be absolute freedom. There won't be. Freedom only exists in a field defined by rules. If there's no rules, it's not freedom, it's chaos. It wouldn't be absolute freedom. It would be absolute chaos. And again, it comes right back to the accelerationists that we had talked about earlier, these people that want that collapse. For what? Exactly. There's no purpose to accelerating the collapse. There's no purpose.
They believe they are the great men that will have the harems of 100 women and will drink the blood of their enemies.
Yep.
But those men that lived then, typically their families, the politics, the in royal court politics was so vicious.
Yeah.
Their kids died. They were assassinated. They were poisoned.
Yeah. Yeah. So your one viable son that could be an heir gets poisoned because this son doesn't like him, wants her kid on the throne.
For every great Khan, there were 2, 3 that got poisoned, stabbed, kids got killed in the cradle. History is merciless.
Yeah.
Kids will arise spontaneously.
Yeah, it's a shame to see all the would-be dictators, the would-be Machiavellis, thinking of certain people on the internet getting mocked. And it doesn't really matter who I could be talking about because there are literally hundreds of thousands of people that will spend 6 months anonymously tweeting out Machiavelli quotes, telling you to read the 48 Laws of Power. Then their girlfriend tries to have sex with Andrew Tate. Everybody laughs and laughs and laughs, and then they block me over it, even though I wasn't even involved. So whatever. I'm definitely not talking about anybody in particular.
Andrew Tate chooses who.
Go out there.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know who I mean. Nobody could figure out. I don't make any diaper jokes about this person to this very fucking day. So, as much fun as this is, we should probably start to wrap this up, just because, we already have a tendency of 2-hour plus long episodes. But I think this is probably a subject we'll end up coming back to more than once because there's a whole lot to get into. And I mean, anybody who's read the Manifesto could tell you pretty easily, we've barely gotten to even halfway through. We're barely touching on these ideas. So, gentlemen, it's been a good episode. We'll have to come back again for a second. We'll have to drop a second Unabomb on the people at a future date. We'll coordinate that later.
Yeah, we will.
For the Kung Fu discussion group, I am your Uncle Sickness. You can find me on Twitter at Sickness Kung Fu, Instagram the same. Visit the website sicknesskungfu.com. Gentlemen, where can the people find you? Tommy?
Lake Hester on Twitter will be a good place, but typically I'm just anonymous, apart from my constant self-doxing with Kung Fu Uncle over here.
Matt, where can the people find you?
More active on Instagram, sometimes on Twitter. I have a toe in that water. Mostly Instagram. Yoga Midnight.
Same on both. Alex, where can the people find you?
I go by Mako Decal on Twitter, and I'm also on Instagram, Titanium Lung, but I haven't been particularly active lately on either of those. I've had other things that I've been preoccupied with for the past 2 months, but that's been put on hold for the time being. So until that resumes, I will be noodling around on the internet.
Fun stuff. So maybe we'll finally see that next installment in the Dark World Lessons series. Or maybe I'll just start posting things that I've been sitting on.
Yes.
Maybe I'll just post on your behalf. I can do that,
Oh, cool.
Yeah, since I control that, I can just pick who gets credit for what at Sickness Kung Fu. So maybe there might be a post about just, I love drawing dick mustaches on myself by Alex.
I've been working on seeing if I can prepare something. But I loaned my book of the 9 laws to somebody, and I won't say names, but somebody that was
Who needs to understand the
who
truth.
needs to understand the dark world.
Yes, the darkness that is all around him at all times. The poor bastard.
Yep.
I wish him luck in that whole situation, but that'll be good. So again, we are the Kung Fu Discussion Group. Buy Sanction. Read up on Uncle Ted's Manifesto. Do interesting things and don't listen to people that tell you should be afraid. Tell them, fuck you, Karen. You are not the boss of me. All right. Build up your Kung Fu.
Stupid? No good? With no talent? You shouldn't talk like that. We can fix your problem very quickly.